afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the annual members meeting of the Royal Surrey NHS Foundation Trust. My name is Sue Schuber and I'm the chair of the trust. This is the second year that we've held our annual members meeting virtually, and the normal virtual meeting protocols will apply. The screen that you're looking at has a space where slides will appear, and down the left-hand side of your screen there are tabs for documents and for voting. And should you wish to ask a question during the meeting, there is a speech bubble on the bottom right-hand side of your screen where you can click and include your question. We have nearly the whole of our board attending today, but you'll only see us one at a time, and we are observing the usual social distancing and infection prevention and control measures. So we will each take off our mask as we come to speak, so that anybody who's hard of hearing can lip read and understand what we're saying. But we'll put those masks back on as soon as we move out of shot. If you do lose your connection, you can get back into the meeting using exactly the same connection that you used to join in the first place. Please don't record the meeting. We are doing so for the benefits of minute taking, but no one else is authorised to do so. Any questions that are asked during the meeting that we don't have time to answer today will be answered on our website after the meeting. Unlike last year, this is purely a business meeting. However, we do have a members' week lined up later in the year. Beginning on Tuesday, the 5th of October, there will be a number of sessions which will allow you to hear about how robots are transforming surgery, how technology helped us to treat COVID, and how we're progressing with our green plan, all of which will help us to build back better, fairer and more sustainably. So do join us for this programme of events and look on our website for details. Here's our agenda for this afternoon's meeting. As you can see, the first item is to approve the minutes of 2020's annual members meeting. So could I ask you, if you have any corrections to the minutes which were published with the agenda, could you put a comment in the chat now so that I can see it? If I don't see any comments in the chat, I will accept that as the meeting's approval to sign those minutes as a correct record. After my welcome, we will go through a proposal to make a change to the Constitution, which will be led by one of our public governors, Dave Shuter, and then the Chief Executive, Finance Director, Auditor's Report, and our lead Governor's Report before we come back for questions from members and the public. And at the end of the meeting, I will announce the result of the vote. So we have apologies for absence from Governors Martin Reid, Jerry Ogilvie and Matt Furness, from non-executive directors Lake Jemmett and Julia Dutchman-Bailey, and from executive directors Dr. Marianne Bilsley and Joe Mountjoy. I'm just going to check to see whether we have any comments about the minutes. And no, we don't. So I am going to assume that we can approve those minutes as a correct record of the meeting. Before I hand over to other speakers, I just want to say a few thank yous, and first of all to remember two colleagues who we've lost during the course of the 2020-21 year that we're considering. Andrew Moncrief, who was our public governor for Chichester, sadly died during the early stages of the COVID pandemic, and Philip Penson, who worked in our theatres, died later in the year. I also want to offer many thanks to all of those who contributed to our success in 2020-21. All of our very special George Cross recipient Royal Surrey colleagues, partners in the health and social care system, in the integrated care system, Surrey Heartlands, the Integrated Care Partnership in Guildford and Waverley, ProCare, the other acute hospitals that we work with, primary care, the voluntary sector and Health Watch. Also the Mayor of Guildford, Councillor Mrs Marsha Mosley and her team, and Professor Max Liu at the university and his team. Special mention for our retiring company secretary, Suzanne Nelson-Vermeyer, who has left us just recently, and also our lead governor, Dr. Jan Whitby, from whom you'll be hearing later. Jan has been a governor at the Trust since we became a foundation trust and has been lead governor for 5 years. This is her last annual members meeting as lead governor, and we'd just like to thank her very much for her excellent service in that role. In mentioning our staff, of course, I include the staff of our subsidiaries, volunteers, governors, executives and non-executive directors, and our biggest supporters and most constructive critics, our patients and the communities that we serve. 2020-21 has been a year like no other, and we will continue to benefit from what it's taught us and feel the repercussions of this year for many years to come. Thank you all very much for not just standing with us during this very difficult time, but rolling up your sleeves and really working with us, battling and caring with us during this period. Okay, so the first item of business today is a vote, and here to explain the vote to you is one of our public governors, Dave Shooter. Voting is opening now, and Dave, if you would like to share the background to this vote with members, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sue. My name is David Shooter, elected public governor for the rest of England, and I'm here to present the Constitution Amendment for the members to vote on. This is for the public members to vote on. By way of background, the previous provision, as set out in the report, allowed public governors to stand for election for an unlimited number of consecutive terms, subject to a vote of the Council of Governors to allow this, whereas the model provision allows the maximum number of terms to 3 times 3 years, 9 years in total consecutively. The model provision does not prevent anybody standing again after 3 terms, but effectively requires a break before standing again. I was originally elected as a governor in 2009 and served 3 terms in 2016. Then took a break of 2 years, standing again in 2018. For me, the break was beneficial to take a step back, review and refresh my thoughts of the role and as seen by a member of the public and patients. I do understand that there was reasoning for the continuation favouring potential unlimited terms for governors previously with a new board appointed in 2017. But the situation in last year and this year is very different, with the Council of Governors and board recently agreeing to return to the original arrangement of 3 times 3 year terms. This will encourage a refresh of new eyes and views brought to the Council of Governors, as well as inviting diversity of many underrepresented groups to become governors. If you're a public member of the Trust, you would have been sent voter details to be able to vote for this afternoon. There's two votes. You can vote to fully support both the Council of Governors and the board in their decision in returning to limited the terms to 3 times 3 years, or you can vote to continue unlimited terms. A simple majority of the voting membership is required to support this change. Sue, our chair, will open the voting shortly, and the result will be announced towards the end of today's meeting. If you have any questions, please do ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. So just in summary, on the left of your screen, you will see a number of tabs, buttons, one of which is for voting. If you click on that, as a public member of the Trust, you will be able to vote either for the proposition that we revert to 3 times 3 years consecutive terms for governors, or against the proposition. And if you vote against, we will continue with the status quo, which is unlimited opportunities to stand again as a governor. So very simple, 2 options, 1 vote. And I will be announcing the result at the end of the meeting, and voting is open now. So I I hope that's clear. As Dave said, if you do have questions, you can raise them in the chat box and we will do our best to come back to you and answer them straight away. Now I'd like to hand over to our Chief Executive, Louise Stead, who's going to review the year 2020 to 21 and present our annual report. Louise.
Thank you, Sue, and good afternoon. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Louise Stead and I'm Chief Executive here at the Royal Surrey NHS Foundation Trust. After another extraordinary year, I am delighted to be able to share with you some of the highlights of the work that the incredible Royal Surrey family has delivered in this financial year. For those of you who'd like to read the detail, our annual report and accounts were published in June on our website. And afterwards, I will present our Finance Director, who will talk you through an overview of the finances. But what we're going to do now is just cover some of the brief highlights so that you don't have to wade through every single page of that report. So COVID-19 has affected every single one of us, and most importantly, our people. All of us will know somebody who has been affected by this, or in fact has suffered from COVID themselves. But for our staff, the burden has been especially great. From the emotional toll of caring for so many very ill patients, to staying away from loved ones to keep them safe, or from working in completely different environments because actually that's where the need was. Not a day has gone past that I haven't been proud to call myself a member of staff for this amazing health community. People, our staff, are at the essence of everything that is special about this trust. And at last year's annual members meeting, I shared the highlights of the new wellbeing strategy with you. This year, I would like to share a few more of the ways we've been looking after our staff. We have 6 new igloos, which have heaters for cooler months and fans for hotter ones, giving our staff a place away from a clinical setting to take a break and recharge. We have additional counselling and mental health support to make sure that our teams feel listened to and are supported. And we are providing free fruit to staff in some of our busiest areas in order that they can have a healthy snack during their breaks. These are just some of the few ways we are supporting our staff to make sure that they can give of their best to care for our patients. I'm now going to focus on our performance, including against national targets, before showing you a short film which highlights the achievements of the year. But let's start with taking a look at some of our True North objectives. As a reminder, our vision is to provide nationally celebrated, community-focused health and care. And to do this, we set ourselves ambitious targets. And despite the pandemic in 2021, this was no exception to what we aim to achieve. You will see our True North goals here on the right-hand side. And you'll be able to also see some of the ways that we made progress in the year. We continue to deliver life-saving and life-changing cancer treatments. We also ensured we reduced the amount of traffic coming onto the Trust site by supporting flexible working wherever possible. As I've already said, the focus on health and well-being for our staff has been pivotal to keeping our sickness and absence levels as low as possible. Understandably, our achievements against constitutional targets have suffered. But against the backdrop of a global pandemic, I'm sure you will agree when we look at them in more detail shortly that our teams have done incredibly well. And one of the final things that has come out of the pandemic, and you have to look for the silver linings, is an increase in the partnership working between healthcare providers across Surrey and in some cases beyond. So let's look at some of our national targets, starting with cancer. Throughout the peaks of the pandemic, cancer services never stopped or slowed. We continued to deliver chemotherapy and radiotherapy, adapting how we did this to ensure it was COVID safe. Our surgeons still performed life-saving operations every day. In fact, between April 2020 and March 2021, we delivered over 3,500 chemotherapy regimes, over 3,000 radiotherapy courses, and nearly 2,000 cancer surgeries. There are 2 key factors that have influenced cancer performance. One, some people with concerning symptoms were worried about COVID and consequently did not come up to their local hospital. And two, some people came to us very late in their 62-day pathway, and there were many reasons for this, some of which were related to referrals from other trusts. So, moving on to referral to treatment performance. During the first wave of COVID, you will be able to see on this graph that our performance dropped to 60%. This was largely as a result of stopping non-urgent face-to-face appointments, and it took a little while to get going again with the alternatives. By the second wave and the third wave, we were much better prepared. We had video and telephone appointments up and going, and patients were able to use our drive-through services. So despite significantly higher numbers of COVID patients in January 2021, we maintained a much better RTT performance of between 75 and 80% in the later part of the year. By the end of the year, we did have, due to the pandemic, 744 patients who have been waiting over a year for treatment. I'm pleased to say that this has since reduced by 44%, and we continue to work hard on our COVID recovery. Moving on to our emergency department. We know that nationally, trust emergency departments have been under immense pressure as a result of increased attendances, patients being sicker, and of course, flow. In other words, not having somewhere to send patients to when they're ready to be discharged. We have consistently achieved above the national average for performance against the 4-hour national target during the pandemic year, although of course not at the national target of 95%. Within a national context, Royal Surrey ended the 2021 financial year within the top quartile for A&E performance. During the peaks of the pandemic, we often saw unpredictable and sometimes considerably lower numbers attending our department. This trend has not continued as we move into the current financial year, with higher than ever daily numbers being seen. The team continues to work incredibly hard, and I want to thank them for that. I'd just like to touch on ambulance handovers. The Royal Surrey is very, very good at ambulance handovers. As you can see from this graph, the numbers of handovers exceeding 60 minutes are very low. We highlight this because this is something that can make a big difference. Fast turnovers mean people are getting into the department quickly, but not only are patients receiving treatment in a timely fashion, but these ambulances are back out on the road, helping the whole system moving. So it's a positive not just for the Royal Surrey, but for the whole community we serve. Diagnostics performance. This graph, I think, tells a real story. You can see that during the initial stages of the pandemic, some diagnostics were suspended, with staff being redeployed to other areas of the trust, including intensive care. This led to a very significant drop, which means an increase in the number of patients waiting more than 6 weeks to be seen. However, you can then see how steeply this climbs. Our staff worked additional shifts, 7 days a week. Lots of other measures were brought in to make sure that we quickly got back to pre-pandemic levels by August 2020. This year has also been an incredibly busy year for our estates team. And what you'll see on this slide is really showing you a build like no other. During the pandemic, we purchased and installed a 20-bedded COVID isolation ward. This was built in just 14 weeks and wouldn't have been possible without the support of Guildford Borough Council. The ward continues to treat COVID-19 patients away from the main hospital site, but to reassure you, it will be needed for infectious diseases and patients requiring side rooms long after COVID has gone. We also, in just 8 days, installed a new oxygen tank, doubling the supply we had available, which enabled us to deliver high oxygen demanding treatments for our COVID patients. So I think what we'll do is move on to the film that we want to show you, which really highlights some of the key elements of this year. I think it really shows you what strong teamwork can do and a real focus on our patients. So let's take a look at that film.
Last year, Royal Surrey staff came together like never before.
We bonded so quickly.
It was that spirit of togetherness,
a team spirit,
combined with an unwavering commitment to patient care.
We are one big family.
That kept our teams working throughout the pandemic.
Really busy.
Going above and beyond in the face of some extraordinary challenges. Togetherness not only got us through the toughest 12 months in living memory, it helped us achieve so much. From the very start of the pandemic, Royal Surrey's research focus turned on supporting the national effort on prevention, diagnosis and treatment of COVID-19.
I think as a trust we can be incredibly proud of our efforts in supporting the urgent public health research. Over 1,000 patients have participated in these studies. They've helped identify therapies that have been shown to be effective for COVID patients and have saved lives at the trust, but also many lives nationally and internationally.
In April 2020, the Trust set up pop-up clinics to screen and treat the local homeless community for hepatitis C and liver damage. This potentially life-saving service saw the hepatitis outreach team win a number of significant awards. In fact, the financial year 2020 was a great year for awards and recognition. For example, our alcohol liaison team won the Health Service Journal's Patient Safety Changing Culture Award 2020. And Jill Hickman, Infection Control Lead Nurse, was awarded the Silver Award for her dedication, commitment and infection control leadership during the pandemic. Project Wingman was a health and wellbeing initiative which really took off. British Airways, Virgin and EasyJet cabin crew, who were grounded during the pandemic, set up a first-class relaxation lounge for our hard-working staff. It proved to be a soaring success as a place for our team members to relax and unwind before and after their shifts. In June 2020, the Trust's dedicated insomnia team launched a groundbreaking video treatment programme to continue much-needed support for insomnia sufferers throughout the pandemic.
And the response really from patients has been extremely positive. It's not only convenient because patients can watch the videos in their own home, but it obviously saves them travelling many miles really for some patients.
Continuing on the innovation theme, our drive-through glaucoma monitoring and eye pressure measurement service is thought to be the first of its kind in England. It's great to see that drive-through services which offer convenience and safety have been welcomed by many groups of Royal Surrey patients. Last summer, Royal Surrey was officially recognised for offering outstanding healthcare across a number of its services after a visit by the Care Quality Commission.
Ready?
Meanwhile, the summer also saw the opening of a new 20-bedded isolation ward.
Well, we're all immensely proud of our new Guildford ward. It's been put up in absolutely rapid time frame.
We looked after our patients through the COVID pandemic very, very well. And this is just an extension of that really, so that we can continue to provide fantastic care for our patients.
It will kind of free up the hospital to run as normal as possible, given COVID is likely to be with us for a longer period of time.
And we've done it, and it is a huge achievement, and I'm really proud of everyone that's been involved.
Building on our inclusive, welcoming and open culture at the Royal Surrey has been an area of focus. During the year, our teams created and launched 3 new staff networks. Royal Surrey and Ashton St Peter's Hospital joined forces to implement Surrey Safe Care. This shared electronic patient record system will result in a more coordinated approach to effective and consistent care. In December 2020, an expert team of Royal Surrey staff, including nurses, doctors, pharmacists, managers, estate teams and workflow experts, used quality improvement methods to get our vaccination hub up and running in a matter of days.
I think one of the top highlights has been was how quickly we mobilised to set the vaccine centre up. We got 5 days notice before we had to go live. This is a tremendous multidisciplinary effort across all of our teams to be able to achieve that.
At the start of 2021, our radiotherapy department launched its online adaptive radiotherapy treatment, which uses artificial intelligence to target tumours with extreme precision.
cancer surgery isn't really the type of thing that can wait.
We are incredibly proud of our teams that managed to successfully maintain cancer operations throughout the pandemic's first and second waves.
A lot of my colleagues were very active in organising how we look after these patients, which enabled us to actually keep going, doing a good percentage of our cancer surgery actually, and I think comparatively to the rest of the country, I think we did quite well with that.
And in March 2021, we launched our refurbished special care baby unit and second obstetric theatre. The Royal Surrey is now one of the first hospitals in the country to have the facilities to allow parents of premature or poorly babies to stay by their baby's side until they're ready to leave hospital.
What is so wonderful about this whole unit is that it gives the opportunity for parents to stay by their babies 24/7.
Adaptability, tenacity and sustaining an incredible team spirit. These are just some of the qualities our emergency department colleagues displayed throughout the pandemic.
Everybody has been very resilient. I'm very proud to be part of the emergency department. We've done very well. I'm so sorry, I'm always teary-eyed because it was really hard during the pandemic.
What a year when every single member of our staff made us proud. The Royal Surrey would like to say thank you to every person in every team from every corner of our trust. We did this together. We are one Royal Surrey family.
So I hope you'll be able to see how much we have achieved despite the last year being in the COVID pandemic. I've also touched on the fact that some of our patients are still waiting for treatment after the pandemic. And for some of those patients, this wait is longer than we would like. So I wanted to finish by sharing that the Royal Surrey has also been chosen as an accelerator site as part of the Surrey Heartlands Health and Care Partnership bid. This means that we have received about £2.5 million to implement innovative ways to increase the number of planned operations, for example, by buying extra equipment for certain theatres, which will give us more flexibility about the way we can perform operations. As an accelerator site, we're one of a selection of trusts across the country pioneering new ways of working to speed up recovery, and we'll be sharing what we learn with other trusts as we go. And throughout this recovery, as has been the case throughout every year of the Royal Surrey's life, we have always been guided by our values. We pride ourselves on being an organisation that cares together, learns together, excels together, and continuously improves. Thank you. I'd now like to hand you over to Ross Dunworth, our Finance Director, to take you through the finances of the last year.
All right, thank you for that, Louise, and thank you to everyone in the Trust. 2021 was a financial year like no other as well. Certainly, I've never experienced anything like it in nearly 30 years of NHS finance. The NHS got billions in extra funding to cope with COVID, and as a result of that, the entire financial regime that we've been used to working for a decade or more changed. We were given allocations instead of being paid the activity and the treatments that we gave. We had to respond quickly and efficiently for all the things that we had to do to keep patients safe and change the way that the hospital operated, as you saw in the film. And for that, we received further funding. In terms of the financial highlights, the first thing I'd like to say is that we met our surplus target again. That's important because surpluses create cash. We put it in the bank and then we spend it on equipment and buildings. Secondly, we continued the good financial management that we have done, which also enables us to be more efficient. And we achieved savings despite COVID. The staff and managers and budget holders and clinicians all working to deliver about £11 million worth of efficiencies, which again, we reinvest in our services at the Royal Surrey. We work within the Integrated Care Partnership of Guildford and Waverley to help support the local health economy. And we were really, really proud to receive outstanding for the use of resources, which showed that we use the money we're given as well as we possibly can. Next slide. The highlights, we did better than planned. We always do, and we always intend to do so. But that's actually to invest in our services. Last year we spent 26 million or more on capital spend, buildings and equipment. 7.4 of that was COVID, predominantly on Guildford Ward, but other things. We ended up with a really healthy cash balance, which any finance director's really pleased about. And I'll be telling you a little bit of the plans we've got for spending that money in the later presentation. One thing we were keen to doing as well was reducing our average spend of agency staff. We prefer to employ our own staff and pay bank staff to do the extra work that we require at this trust. And we've been successful over the last few years to reduce that percentage, and we managed to do that again. Next slide. COVID impact on the trust. We spent around about 17 million pounds on COVID. 9 million of that was revenue running costs, doing all the things that Louise talked about and we saw in the film, and about 7.4 million on capital items. Guildford Ward wasn't cheap, 3.4 million. IT, 1.5 million, 2.5 million on additional medical equipment. And I'd like to thank not only estates, but our IT guys, the people who helped us in MediRest, quality and nursing, our infection control team, supported by HR and finance, because without their help, we wouldn't have spent that money. And we spent it in about 3 months, which is a bit scary for a director of finance when we try to control what we spend. But we all came together to make sure that we put in place the infrastructure that we felt was required to keep patients safe and manage the pandemic. Sorry. The surplus, outstanding financial performance, it enables us to invest for the future. And it wasn't just about COVID. We put revenue investments to support ED, our community, and the recovery process that we have to put in place to get that waiting list down. We put money into non-COVID areas. Surrey Safe Care is an expensive but essential future investment for us. The second obstetric theatre, and we also opened up a state-of-the-art histopathology lab and started design work for refurbishment of St Luke's. All of this despite the pandemic. Next slide. And so for the plan for this year, we are aiming for yet another surplus. We've got plans to implement fully Surrey Safe Care, which is another 11 million pounds worth of investment. We're increasing our diagnostic capacity with 2 MRIs on site starting this year, and we're doing the work to enable St Luke's refurbishment to take place, because the investment beyond this financial year is important. The Hayes Wing, the 2 MRIs will cost about 5 million. The long-awaited refurbishment of level A and B radiotherapy and St Luke's outpatients will be 7 million. We're going to be building an MRI centre down at Milford, which will be another 5 million. The long-awaited multi-storey car park, which we hope to get planning permission in October, will be a 12 million pound investment, and certainly neither, given the building site, we will be working within 2 years, because the biggest single investment we're doing is the Cancer and Surgical Innovation Centre, which is going to be a 30 million pound investment on the Royal Surrey site. And recently launched a charitable programme led by our local Waverley MP, Jeremy Hunt. That's a hugely exciting programme over the next 2 to 3 years for this trust. It isn't all about COVID, it's about making sure we deliver the best possible environment which staff and patients can work within. Thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand you over to our auditors, KPMG, who will take you through the excellent annual account that was produced by my finance team and supported by lots of people within the trust. If I can hand you over to Van Ladras, he will take you through the audit process. Thank you very much. Ben.
Thank you, Ross. It's Ben Lazarus here, lovely to be here today. I'm from KPMG, the Trust's external auditors. I'll just take a few minutes today, if that's okay, to talk you through our responsibilities as your Trust external auditors before going into some of the headlines from our 2020-21 audit. So if we move on to the next slide, our responsibilities as your auditors, I've split that into 4 different kind of parts here. So first and probably foremost, the financial statements, the audit, the annual report and accounts that Ross and Louise have talked about, that really important trust document that sets out the financials, but also a range of other things that have happened in the year at the trust. It's our job as your external auditors to perform a range of audit procedures throughout the course of the year to be able to say, give an opinion at the end of the year that those financial statements are complete and accurate to a material level that we set and agree with the trust. We look at the numbers, of course, and check that we can validate those, but also lots of the disclosures and those wordy elements of that really important report that's been touched on today. We also look at value for money, and that's an area that's really been enhanced this year, partly because of the response to COVID and the need that Ross mentioned to spend money quite quickly, but also because of audit regulations around the work that we have to do around value for money. So we really have to perform key procedures and provide an opinion over how you use those resources and how you spend that really important money. Thirdly, we also look at what we call whole of government accounts. Obviously, you're one key cog in the overall Department of Health. So you have to report into the Department of Health to create those overall Department of Health numbers. And that submission is a document and a submission that we look at and we audit and we perform procedures over, again, to check the accuracy and completeness of that really important submission. And finally, but really importantly and quite pervasive to all of these things, we report and we rationalise and we discuss with the trust, with the audit committee, with management, with the finance team, our findings and our conclusions throughout the course of the year. And it's probably worth saying at this point, before I go into the detail of the headlines, it's been a really good audit this year. It's been a smooth audit. We'd like to thank the finance team and the wider trust for helping us with that. It's again been a virtual audit, which has had its challenges. Doing, for example, stock takes virtually on camera has been a really tricky part of our audit, but the trust have helped us navigate that really sensibly. So I think that's the overall headline I'd like to get across before going into the details. It's been a smooth and positive audit, despite the challenges that we've had because of remote working. So moving on to the next slide, I'll just go into a little bit more detail about each of those key elements. So as I mentioned, the financial statements, our key responsibility there to audit the financial statements, to review the annual report, and of course to look at some of those really key disclosures, including the remuneration report, which we know is a really kind of important disclosure to kind of a range of stakeholders. Where did we land in the 2021 year? Well, we were able to issue an unqualified opinion, which is as good as it gets when we're talking audit speak. We didn't have to make any modifications to the opinion that we'd make, and we were able to say that the accounts were both true and fair, which, as I say, is as positive as it gets in our audit world. I'd like to go a bit further than that and say, actually, we didn't find any significant issues at all in the audit this year across the whole group. And actually, we found loads of really good best practice areas. We also kind of, we make sure that our audit focuses in on those areas that are either really material or really judgmental and include lots of estimations. So we use most of our audit time and resource to look at those kind of key judgment areas. So just to give you an example, the valuation of land and buildings, that's a really material number to those financial statements. Plus it's got an estimation methodology behind it, which is really quite complicated. So we spent an awful lot of time with specialist support getting to grips with that, and we're able to conclude positively around it. Also think about the different revenue streams this year that the trust has had. That's changed because of COVID. Additional revenue streams, additional expenditure streams, some of which Ross touched upon. Again, we had to adapt our audit approach to make sure we understood the rules and regulations around some of those revenue streams and make sure that the trust were representing those appropriately and fairly in their accounts. And again, we got to a really positive conclusion there. So that just gives you a flavour of some of the key areas driving our overall financial statements unqualified opinion. If I move on to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about value for money. So as I said, the procedures that we had to complete this year around value for money were enhanced, partly because things changed and it was a really unusual year, and partly because we had new regulations asking us to do more and do more earlier in the year, working with finance and working with management across the course of the year. It also means we review the governance statement in really close detail, and we work with other regulatory bodies and their returns to make sure that what's in your financial statements aligns with what's in those other regulatory documents. Again, I think the overall conclusion is a really positive one. For 2020-21, we were able to conclude that the trust had adequate arrangements to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness in its use of resources. Again, adequate probably doesn't quite do it justice. That's as positive as we can get in audit speak and audit conclusions, but that really is as good as it gets for those conclusions. We raised a couple of best practice recommendations that we worked with Ross and the team and the wider teams to agree, but these really were best practice recommendations, looking to enhance things around the edges, nothing fundamental coming out of our value for money work. And given those enhanced procedures we were asked to do this year, that's a really good result and puts you in the top quartile of audits that we've done. And finally, I'll just move on to my final slide, which is, as I said, the whole of government accounts. This is you as a trust reporting into the Department of Health as part of their sort of group audit, if you like. There's a whole of government accounts return that you submit. That's quite a standard return, and it has to be consistent across all of the organisations in the NHS. And we have to perform a whole series of procedures over that submission. Again, we were able to issue an unqualified audit certificate around that return, which again is as positive as it gets, and no significant findings at all to bring to your attention today. So that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'd just reiterate the thanks to the Trust for helping coordinate a smooth audit in a difficult year, and I'd really just reiterate that point about it being a really positive audit. Thank you, and back over to Sue.
Before I hand you over to our lead governor for her report, I just want to remind those of you who might have joined the meeting a little bit late that we have a vote running, and that if you are a public member of the Trust, you can cast your vote by selecting the tab on the left-hand side of your screen, which says voting, and voting either for or against the proposition. The proposition, which is supported by both the Board of Directors and the Council of Governors, is that the Trust reverts to the way most trusts elect their governors, and that is allowing a governor, a public governor, to stand for 3 consecutive terms of 3 years, and then if they wish to stand again, to take a break before they do so. At the moment, we allow governors to stand for an indefinite number of consecutive terms, and we're recommending that we revert to the 3 times 3 years method. So those of you who missed that explanation at the beginning of the meeting, please do feel free to cast your vote in the manner that I've described. And if you are a governor, please remember that you have already cast your vote as part of the Council of Governors, so you don't need to do so again. And now I'd like to hand you over to Dr. Jan Whitby, our lead governor, who has recorded a message. Jan will be available at the end of the meeting, along with members of the board, to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Good afternoon, my name is Dr. Jan Whitby. I have been a governor at the Royal Surrey for 12 years, since the hospital became a foundation trust. I have also been lead governor for 5 years, and this is my final year. I have seen 95 governors volunteer in that time, and I just wanted to start by publicly acknowledging the excellent work and achievements that a number of those governors have contributed in those years. COVID has changed most of our lives beyond recognition. For those of us involved with the NHS, life is very different. The Council of Governors has been challenged with keeping in touch with each other, with the Trust, and with our members. Our role has been significantly impacted, but the internet has been used to allow many of the duties expected of us to be continued. So what do we do? Governors are elected or appointed and are unpaid volunteers. We have many different duties, as shown on this slide. We represent the needs and wishes of the community. We assure ourselves of the clinical, quality and financial standards within the Trust. We also appoint and hold the non-executive directors to account. We approve or not significant transactions as defined within the Constitution, and we approve the appointment of the external auditor. Much of the work we do involves attending various hospital meetings, both statutory and non-statutory, including the board meeting. These are shown on the slide. This year, we have been very limited in our ability to undertake regular visits to hospital services and to interact with patients. But as soon as COVID and infection control measures permit, we will resume these activities. There are 8 public constituencies represented by 16 publicly elected governors. We are currently holding an election for 10 governor seats, with the results to be announced tomorrow. We also held a further election earlier this year for 6 governor seats. So this year, we may have significant turnover in the Council of 26 governors. This slide and the next slide show the current public, staff and appointed governors, with those new governors who joined us in March shown outlined in blue. You can find out more about which governors represent your constituency on the Trust website. Details of the website address and the email contact for governors are given on the last of my slides. I mentioned earlier that a number of our governors have been involved over the years in working hard behind the scenes. One example of this is a governor involvement in the vaccination hub. In December, an expert team of Royal Surrey staff used quality improvement methods to create the vaccination hub in just 2 days. A number of governors volunteered to assist with the mass vaccination effort. This enabled excellent interaction with members of the hospital. Often more than 500 people a day attended, and this provided an excellent opportunity for governors to talk to our members about their experience of the Trust and explain what we do. Some members may remember that at a previous annual members meeting, the question of the lack of dignity of the backless patient gowns used in the hospital was raised. Those at the meeting agreed with this concern. The result was that the chief nurse set up a project and 3 wraparound gowns were identified and selected to trial. The outcome was the replacement of the backless gowns by a wraparound style. There are still some circumstances where the use of backless gowns will continue, but this is a great improvement welcomed by patients, and it illustrates an achievement brought about through engagement of governors, members and the executive. As promised, here are the governor website and contact details. Finally, on behalf of the Council of Governors, I would like to take this opportunity to thank every single member of staff for continuing to deliver superb and compassionate healthcare in the midst of such challenging times. They're all stars. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jan, and thank you to all of our governors, all of whom are volunteers and do a fabulous job for the community. And can I just remind those of you who are listening to us today, if you are not already a member of the Trust, it's very easy to join and become a Royal Surrey supporter. You can see on the screen in a moment the website address that you can go to do that. It will cost you nothing. You'll receive regular updates about what the Trust is doing. You'll have an opportunity to be involved in the Trust future. And of course, you can vote for or even stand for election yourself as a governor. So before I move on to questions from members and the public, and we do have a few questions, I would just remind you that voting in the proposition that we have before you today will close at 4:55 p.m. So please make sure that you cast your vote before then. Now, questions from members of the public, and we have a few questions here. Let me start with one which I think I'm going to be asking our Chief Operating Officer, Bob Peat, to comment on. In fact, I think there are 2 that I can ask Bob to respond to here. The first one is with regard to data on attendances at the emergency department. Do you collect data which can provide details on attendances from specific areas, and I think geographic areas? Further, do you collect data on these specific areas to say how many attendances are in fact not urgent emergencies? So Bob, if you'd like to address that one, then I'll read you the second one, which is about the backlog of long waiters.
Good afternoon, everyone. So yes, we do collect and analyse the data on where our patients who come to the emergency department have come from, particularly which GP practice that they're registered to, and we use it to analyse sort of trends and looking at how and why people attend. And importantly, we share that back, particularly with our primary care colleagues, the primary care networks and GPs, and have those conversations through the various system work we're doing about how we can make sure that those attendances are appropriate and how we can support and work with primary care to reduce unnecessary attendances in the emergency department. In terms of the second question, it's quite hard to define what's an unnecessary attendance. What we work to do is to make sure that we support general practice in terms of what they're doing to meet needs of primary care and the range of other services that are available for the public. I think the other important intervention that we've made in recent weeks is we've brought a GP in to provide some shifts of clinical care within the emergency department as a pilot to understand both that need to see a GP and how we can support patients who come to the emergency department.
Thank you, Bob. And before you escape, another question here. How do you plan to get through your surgical backlog of long waiters? The questioner thinks they have heard that we have more than 400 patients who've waited over a year.
Of course. So the backlog, as I think Louise mentioned earlier, was peaked at about 750 patients who were waiting more than a year for their surgery following the consequences, particularly of the latter wave of the pandemic at the end of last year, beginning of this year. And we've already reduced that to circa 400 patients. And our plans and sort of trajectories, forecasts are that that should reduce to no more than 250 patients by the end of the calendar year. In terms of what we're doing about that, we're trying to maximise the amount of operating that we are doing and organising both through our own theatres and also some operating through the independent sector at the adjacent Guildford Nuffield Hospital here on site. And we're also working using some support from externally through the accelerator funding that Louise referenced, and with our quality improvement and transformation colleagues with the theatre teams, how we can be as efficient and effective as possible in terms of treating every single patient we can within the available theatre time, and for example minimising unnecessary cancellations of surgery on the day for whatever reason.
Thank you, Bob. Now I've got a question which I think I will be asking Ross Dunlop, our Finance Director, to respond to. The question says, is there a reason that community hospitals have received less capital investment funding than the main site? Ross, if you could answer that one.
Quite simply, the community hospitals aren't actually owned by the Trust. We rent them from NHS PropCo. So it makes it difficult for us to actually invest in those assets. Also, the main hospital site as an asset is a greater value, have more equipment, more plant, and therefore the backlog maintenance, etc. However, the direct and indirect investment in community services in our hospitals is greater than the 700,000, which was very specific to them. We do have IT, we do have equipment which is contained within the account, which were very specifically used at the community. It is our intention to gain ownership of our 3 hospital sites in the community on the 1st of April next year, and putting a business case to the Secretary of State to transfer the ownership of those hospitals to the Trust.
Thanks very much, Ross. And keeping Bob Pete busy today, another question that he can answer, I'm sure. Has the capacity of Guildford Ward, that's the ward that we built in the last year that we've been using for COVID patients, has the capacity of Guildford Ward been exceeded at any point, and what contingency is there for this possibility?
So thank you. So Guildford Ward has a capacity of 20 isolation rooms, and during the second major wave of the pandemic in December and then January earlier this year, we had significantly more patients with COVID than those 20 beds. We sort of implemented our capacity plan about changing how we used our main wards on the main site, and converted wards to make them safe to look after, and dedicated them to look after COVID patients. And we went through different wards as we grew the number of COVID patients. And our maximum, including the community sites, we had 150 COVID patients being looked after during that second wave. So clearly simply more than Guildford Ward could treat. But we had a plan and moved through different wards and transferred or converted their use and dedicated them and the teams there to look after COVID patients. As I speak, we've got about 10 COVID patients that we're looking after in the Trust, which is clearly well within the COVID capacity, Guildford Ward capacity. And since April, after the second wave, in broad terms, Guildford Ward has been more than sufficient to look after the numbers of COVID patients that we've been seeing.
Thank you very much, Bob. And one last question, which I'm going to ask our HR Director, Louise Ball, to respond to, and that is, we've heard a lot about the stress and strain that NHS staff have been under over the last year. Can you say a bit more about what the Trust is doing to look after all of its staff, Louise?
Thank you, Sue. So I think the last year has been absolutely wonderful in terms of awareness about the impact of the pandemic on people's health and well-being. The things that we were thinking about doing in an ideal world, we have been able to do very quickly and have been able to make a massive impact on the well-being of our staff. So whether it is the igloos that we talked about before, whether it is about having spaces to go, whether it's about recognising the mental health issues and the impact of the things that people have seen on their own well-being, it has been a really, really transformative year. So we are absolutely talking on a daily basis about well-being. We are there looking out for each other. We have been trained to be able to understand the impact of trauma, the impact of teams working together, and we've been encouraging our staff to take time for themselves, for their families, to go on holiday, to be able to take their breaks. And all of these small things just make a big difference. And you can really feel the impact of all the interventions that have taken place over the last year as you walk around. It's really had a big impact on morale and on around engagement and commitment. So our sickness absence levels have been very low. People are really committed to doing a fantastic job for the Trust, for our patients and for our communities. And we are really continuing to do as much as we possibly can to support the health and well-being of our staff.
Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you for that. So it's now 5 o'clock and it's almost time to close the meeting, but I am able to let you know the results of the voting. So we have had 83 members in the meeting today, of whom 48 are eligible to vote. And in fact, 27 members have voted, 25 have voted in favour of the proposition and 2 against. So that is a 92.59% vote in favour of the proposition. And what that means is that from 2022, public governors will be able to stand for election for 3 consecutive terms, and if they wish to stand again after that, will need to take a break before they do so. And that brings us in line with most other trusts. So it only remains really for me to thank all of you for attending today, and particularly to thank Karen, Andy, Emma, Laurie, our company secretary, Ali, Will, everybody who has been involved in arranging today's annual members meeting, and to thank my board colleagues for being available to answer questions. Thank you very much for attending, and good afternoon.